And welcome to story number 44. Story 44. Grove Street Haunting. And I got some artwork and some old photographs to go with this one. This is a long story. Ambiance, dollar store ambiance. A good cup of tea. And this particular story took place over a period of about 5 years. I lived in this house, the one I'm going to talk about, which is not far from where I'm at right now. It was almost a daily occurrence there. And it got to the point I let it go. I tried to live with things, and it just really got to a very bad place. And I'll tell you what I did about that. There's a couple of special guest appearances here. My two sons, who were teenagers at the time, I asked them, one's over working in Myanmar. He's over there working right now, so I got hold of him via the internet, and he agreed to make a little video about what he experienced there. And he never believed in these things until this occurrence that he's going to relate to you. My other son, he lives up northern New York, further north from me. He also gave me a little video clip of what he experienced there. My daughter had some experiences there, but she wasn't comfortable sharing these things publicly, and I understand and respect that. So I'll put those video clips in here as well. This is probably going to be the longest of my videos, no doubt, so far. I hope you all are doing okay. I've got some photos that I dug out of the place, mostly just showing the renovations, because we gutted the house, and I'll get to that history. But these photos show that whole process. There's a couple pictures in there of me. One of them, I got a beer mug, of course. Imagine that. I just took a big chug of it, and I got a beer foam mustache going on. So, and the pictures are in varying qualities. They've been sitting around in bags for years. And this event happened between, say, the years 1998 to 2004, thereabouts, 2003, 2004, over a period of about 5 years, actually. All right, I'll get into it, and I guess I haven't scripted any of this, so I'm just going to slug through this, and all right, a couple of the pictures I'm going to bring attention to and talk while I post them, and the other ones I'm just going to throw up random. They're just pictures of the place gutted. You may think you see something in them. That place was very haunted, very much so. But honestly, the pictures are so grainy. They got stuff floating around in it. There's fiberglass, not fiberglass, but insulation of drywall, plaster, you know what I mean? You can find anything if you look hard enough. Okay, this house was built, I believe, around 1870. It's a Victorian house. It's on Congress Street. I won't say which, but it really doesn't matter because I've drawn a picture of it on my cover art for the title page. I drew that. And actually, I'm going to pop that up again and talk about it. Okay, I drew this picture of it, kind of fanciful picture of it. But there are elements in this picture that I try to tie it together, my experience there. You'll see a cross hanging over the top of the place, illuminated, because I did a lot of praying while I was in this house. There's a fly in this picture. That's another story. Black cat. That has to do with my black cat that lived there at the time. And I just couldn't tell. I drew this picture about 10 years ago. And I wrote this story down about 10 years ago. And there's the two women and a man dressed up in 18th century attire. I was living in this house when that event, I told a story about the people in the graveyard. I think it's story 19 or 20. I was living there with my daughter when that happened, so that's kind of part of this time period. Up above the roof, you'll see some musical notes coming up out of the ceiling. That represents, I was like playing my music pretty loud there quite a bit. And usually Radiohead or rock and roll, Leonard Skinner or period music, oldies or, you know, whatever, Metallica, whatever, that kind of stuff. I not actually, honestly, I liked, I still do, Mozart's Requiem Mass and Don Giovanni, the play. I loved that play back then. So I'd play in that, imagine that, Don Giovanni blasting out loud in a house with no insulation. I had a friend tell me he could hear my music on another street down the road. And at that point, I made it a point to turn it down a bit. But I had my friends over, and we all like to carry on. Just beer and music, you know, and laughter, and maybe a card game. So that's some of the cover art. I drew another sketch of the place, a little more realistic. Well, they're both realistic. All right, enough of that picture. All right, this is where the story officially starts. The house was built in 1870, like I said, and there was an old woman that was living there, and she'd raised her family there because I talked to people that were older people that knew these people from the 1960s right on up to present. And they raised their family there in the 1960s and 70s, the husband and wife. The husband died in the house, I'm told. He was a large man, I was told. He might factor into this story later. And then the woman lived there alone, and the children grew up and moved to Florida, I believe, south. And to get away from there, you know, upstate New York, the high taxes, whatever. We have hard winters here. I don't know these people, really. Children moved away, and eventually the mother grew old, and she could no longer climb the stairs, so the second floor and up were unused for years, and she lived downstairs. And that would show when I came into the house how the second floor looked almost untouched. And so the woman died, and the family, the surviving children, decided to auction the home off. And the night of the auction, my mom showed up there. I didn't. My mom bought the house, my mother. And she showed up, and she had a couple of properties in that town at that point. And there was a blizzard, a really wicked blizzard. And wouldn't you know, nobody showed up but my mother. And so there was one bid for a very low sum. The one bid. And the auctioneer called the surviving family, and they agreed to go ahead and sell it for that price. So my mom came into the place at a very, very good price. So, you know, every home has a history. Well, you know, the place needed some work. And lo and behold, she talked me into living there, and I was more than happy to move in there. At the time, I was living a few towns over in an apartment. I was going to college full time and serving in the National Guard as a tank platoon sergeant. And all right, I moved to that place. I love the old house, you know. It looked nice. It was in a nice, very quiet street, Congress Street. Very quiet, very nice street, no crime. The street where you don't lock your cars or your house, you know. There's kids on bikes and skateboards, and no, you know, 2 churches on that street alone. But, you know, it's just people. And so I moved in there and started working on it. And like I said, she bought it in the wintertime, and I drove by one day, and the snow was like waist deep, and nobody was living there. And I was kind of excited about moving in there and getting to work. And I noticed one day from the road when I drove by and pulled up by the roadside that the windows looked all frosted, and they didn't look frosted before. Even the upstairs windows were covered in frost. You know, it was the middle of winter, upstate New York. And I thought, well, that's not good because they weren't like that the other day, and it was just as cold. It was dry inside. So I went in the front door, trudged through the snow waist deep. The front door wouldn't open. It was warped somewhat. I pushed it in and heard running water. Uh-oh. Sure enough, I got to the kitchen, which is on the first floor, and the pipes had burst and water was just flying up out of the sink, and it was a mess. There was about an inch of water on the kitchen floor, and the wooden floor, instead of being level, was sagged in, almost looked like it wanted to just fall in from the weight of the water. I think it'd been that way for about 3 days. And the moisture had caused the roof to sag in place because the ceiling and everything picked up moisture, and it was all lath. You know, it wasn't drywall. It was a horsehair lath, plaster lath, really old. It was all starting to come in. The bathroom upstairs was burst out and ruined. I got the water shut off and I started making phone calls. And it turned out that the local fuel oil place, their delivery man had forgot to make a delivery. And the man that owned the fuel oil place happened to live on that street at that time. And he came in the next day with a notepad, and he was really good. He just said flat out, he felt awful. And I think he did feel awful. He said, I'll take care of everything. I mean, he put a lot of money into that place. It wound up getting new bathrooms. He paid for the floors. It got new windows throughout that he paid for. He was really good about paying for everything, and he went above and beyond that in some ways. So, round about February, I move in, and there are a couple of guys, local guys that like to flip houses, construction guys. They started work, and well, here's a picture. I'll talk about it. And this one actually shows the amount of stuff we were tearing out of that place. There's a big dumpster in the driveway and a truck to haul stuff away in the front of the place. And the windows were all taken out in places because the windows were getting replaced, and we just throw the debris that we're gutting the walls right out the window into the dumpster. It's a very messy job. All right, off that picture. Yeah, snapper's not working. I remember when it came time, I just remember this, to start gutting the place. And I really loved the house. I really wanted to make it nice, despite it being pretty well wiped out. And I asked the one guy, Dale, was his name, old Vietnam vet, salty guy. I says, well, how do you do this? And he said, you know how? He says, I'll tell you what. And he handed me this great big claw hammer, a wrecking hammer. And with a great big hammer. And he says, you just take out some frustration. He said, this is my favorite part. I'm like, what? He goes, crash. And he just ripped right through, right? His hammer goes ripping through the wall. And I said, I got it. And I just went nuts, you know, just started just tearing things apart. We didn't ruin the door frames or the studs in the wall or joist or any of that. Just all that lath and horsehair. With horsehair, they used to, in the old days, they took horsehair and mixed it in with their plaster that they would cover over the lath. It was a mixture of plaster with horsehair. Fly, you're going to pay for it when I'm done with this video. So it was very messy. And here's a couple of pictures of what the place looked like after we were pretty much done gutting it, you know. I'll just let them cycle through. I'll keep telling the story. My son's in one of these, standing in back there. He's one that my son Tim, who's going to relay a story, and the one that's in Myanmar. He's in one of these pictures. All right, so to the ghost story. It was not long after we started gutting the place, and I actually moved in there. A couple of cots and a heater, a kerosene heater, and things started happening. We gutted the place. Whatever the resident's spirit was there, I don't think liked that we gutted the place, and I don't think he liked us being there. I don't think he liked my music or the renovation guys. They liked to jam their music, and they were always drinking beer too. They were a pretty good time. um, things started happening. And I moved in there, and the renovation guys would hang around. Say they get done at 5 p.m., and they'd hang around and talk till about 7. They'd drink some beers and play some old rock and roll and stuff, you know. And then I'd be there alone all night. And didn't really think anything of it till one night I was sitting in the, I guess what would be called living room. Here's the thing about that place. It was very compartmentalized, very Victorian. I mean, it had a parlor, a foyer, a living room, a kitchen, a downstairs large bathroom. It had a, I don't know what you'd call it. There, another room with stained glass, cut glass, and stained crystal glass and stained glass here and there throughout the place. And really bespoke of a different era and time, the way people live. Like nowadays, you know, a modern house nowadays that I know of, you know, you got a kitchen. It's kind of part of a great big living room where you eat your meals and you cook and, you know, but back then everything was closed off. And all these rooms downstairs, they had like their own doorway. Like you open the door, now you're in the living room. You open that door, now you're in the foyer. Just something I want to bring up. So all the doors were off at any rate at this point. The walls were pretty much gutted. Now this is still wintertime, and I had blocked off the upstairs. Actually, when this event happened, event 1 that I'm going to mention, these guys, they were done with their work. And I had to do the finish up work, the spackling of the, you know, we put drywall in. All the painting and all the finish work I did myself. My daughter helped out. But at this time, I was living there alone. And so by myself, and I had closed off the upstairs. And I'm going to put a picture again of me standing there with that beer mug, and I got a beer foam mustache. It looks kind of silly, but behind me, you will see in this picture, a stairwell going upstairs. Well, I was standing in the front of the house in what would have been the living room when I took this picture, and you see the stairwell going upstairs behind me, standing there with a beer mug. Well, at the time this event happened, I was off to the right in the other room, staring at pretty much where I was standing in this picture, just blankly staring. All right. Not thinking anything, and I didn't have any music playing, nothing going on, just kind of zoning out. And all of a sudden I see a human-sized, well, let me back up, sorry. I had the upstairs closed off. I had taped up, it was drywall at this point, all through the place. So it wasn't opened up like in that picture. It was actually drywall. And so I had the stairwell taped off with a big thick sheet of fiberglass insulation that I really went to trouble to put it up there really solid with a lot of duct tape and staples and tacks, because I only wanted to heat the downstairs. I was going to do the downstairs while it was still cold, February and March, and heat that with a big kerosene heater. Then when it got warmer, I was going to take the drywall down and go upstairs and start working upstairs. So I'm sitting downstairs and I'm staring, and I see a human-shaped, black, sooty figure, no doubt about it. And I see it cross from the living room into my line of sight, and it just glided up the stairs to the second floor. And I'm like, whoa. And the next thing I know, I hear a loud rip, and all that stuff went flying down the stairs. And first I heard like somebody grabbed it and just tore it down. I heard a loud rip, and then it all just came sailing down the stairs. So we call him the big guy in cowboy boots, because that's what we all heard, a very large man, my size-ish, at least, with like really hard-soled shoes on the whole there was no carpeting in the place. It was all hardwood floor. So you would hear it, you know, and he'd walk and you'd hear it really quite distinctly when he walked. You could even feel his footsteps, the way that, like, it sounded like he was wearing cowboy boots, sorry. Yeah, he went up the stairs and ripped all that down. You could hear it rip, and then just tossed it down. All that fiberglass, a big sheet, went sailing down into the stairs and into my living room. I'm getting flustered. I got back up here. So I officially knew at that point that I was not alone there, but other things were happening. I'd heard him walking around before. I just tried to play it off. You know what I mean? Try to just live and live, let live, and let it be. Uh, uh, I didn't write any of this down. I'm trying to relate things that happened over a long period of time. My guests started hearing things. Things were happening. Doors opening and closing. I could hear them walking around upstairs. Things would fall off the counters. All the stuff. Lights turn off and on. The usual stuff. It was every day and every night. Honestly. So I'm just going to mention things I remember that kind of stood out. When I finally moved upstairs, I lived upstairs in the front of the building, and there were, I'm going to put a floor plan up that I drew. I lived up in the front of the house. You'll see this, I'm going to use this floor plan for another event that happens later on in the story. The one in the front it shows a tarp and a paint can, I think I drew in. That's part of another event. But that room was my bedroom, all right? And that's the upstairs second floor plan. And the first floor plan. Well, it's the same size as the second floor, so it's just a different arrangement of walls. That's it. So, at any rate, off that picture, I lived in the upstairs master bedroom, I'd call it, in the front. And there's nobody else in the house, and there's really no furniture to speak of in the house at that time. Not upstairs, and very little downstairs. I hate to say it. Lawn chairs, and I've never had much. Didn't have much of anything back then. Well, I had a bed, and I was upstairs, and every night I would hear that guy, whoever it was, pace up and down that hallway on the second floor, and I'd have my door closed, and he'd pace up to the door, and then he'd stop right in front of my door. And then there'd be about 5-second pause, and then he'd walk back down the hallway and stop. And then pace back up to my door and stop. And he'd do that for maybe 10 minutes. I think I said a lot of prayers then. And I think he just wasn't allowed to come in that room with me. And I thank God for that, because I never had anything happen in that room with me in it. But he would stop in front of that door and then walk back down the hall. You'd hear him real heavy, hard soles on hardwood floor. And yeah, right? Whatever. No, I'm not going to imitate it. And then he'd typically go into the room next door to that. And he would trash the place. And the bizarre thing about this is there was nothing in that room at that time. I think there was an empty cardboard box. That's it. That's all that was in that room. And that would be, if I was in the bedroom facing the back of the house and my door in the hallway there, it would be the room off on this side in the middle of the house. Up, and it was adjoining the master bedroom, as he would throw things up against the wall. And my bed was up against the wall in the master bedroom. And I'm laying there trembling. I'm praying to God. I'm praying, Lord, protect me, watch after me, camp your angels around me, Lord. And the Lord did, because he never got into that place, not my room. But you'd hear him sound like he's throwing furniture around, furniture that didn't exist. That's bizarre. And when I wrap all these ghost stories up, I want to talk about that. Sound like he's throwing furniture around, boxes and whatever, things that weren't in there. And some of them he's throwing up against the wall, hard, having a temper tantrum. And then it would stop. And all will be silent for a while. Then I'd hear him pacing again. And this went on and on. One time my buddy, he was staying with me for about 6 months. My buddy Leon, he did not believe in spirits or paranormal. In fact, we were pretty good friends, still are. He moved out of state like a lot of New Yorkers. I'd tell him a ghost story and he'd just look at me and like he's dealing with a lunatic. You know what I mean? He didn't believe in these things, flat out, until he stayed at my place. That house made a believer out of a lot of non-believers. I came home one day and he was there alone, and I walk in the door. It was summertime, and he looked at me. I walk in the door. He says, "Where'd you just come from?" I said, "I just got here. You know, I pulled in the driveway. I just got there." I'm like, "Where do you think I just came from?" He said, "Well, who's upstairs?" I said, "Nobody." He says, "Well, I heard somebody upstairs. I thought it was you." And we both went upstairs together. There's nobody up there, obviously. What'd you hear? Well, he heard somebody walking around like everything I described, heavy, hard souls, and he heard somebody trashing that room. He specifically heard somebody trash that room. And it was quite loud. You're talking about an old wooden house. That place was like a giant sound box. You heard things, it would shake the house, shake the whole place. And so he was a believer after that. My son, Tim, had an experience there. I'll let him tell that story. Here's my son, Timmy. I'm going to cut him into the video right here. Oh, here's his story. Back.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and cheers from Myanmar. Wherever you are in the world, Myanmar is a beautiful place. You should come visit. So, I'm here to tell you about an experience that left me standing in a snowstorm with no shoes or socks on, scared out of my mind, forever believing in ghosts. Now, this happened when I was 15 years old. At the time, I lived alone with my father, and he was working the night shift. And we lived in this old Victorian house, a big pink Victorian house. And it was about 12 o'clock at night. I'd been listening to some music, and it was just me and our black cat alone in the house. And I hear upstairs in what was the pink bedroom the sound of complete destruction, like a 200-pound man was just taking bookshelves, throwing them against the wall, throwing chairs against the wall. As this was happening, I came to my feet and I stood in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs. And it continued for about 30 seconds, just the loudest sound of destruction happening in this room. No voices, just I assumed the room was completely trashed. And in my mind, I'd never experienced ghosts. And I believed 100% I had been alone all night long in this house. We had no neighbors. There was no reason for anyone to be in the house other than myself. So I say at the bottom of the stairs, "Who's here? Hey, who's up there?" When I hear nothing and I hear no response, I see myself, it's like an out-of-body experience where suddenly I realize I'm kind of like this character in a horror movie who inspects the scene rather than running away. But it just, to me, it had to have a logical explanation. There was something up there, an animal. Maybe there was a window open. The noise was so loud and it happened for so long. It was clear something was being done by a human. But I go up to the top of the stairs, and in the hallway I say, "Hey, who's here?" Nothing. I go to the entryway of the pink bedroom, and I look in, and nothing has been moved. I check the other bedrooms. Nothing has been moved. So the last logical thing that I can cling on to, maybe it was in the attic. Now, we had an unfinished attic. It was very breezy. I opened up the door to the attic. There's one light bulb in the attic. I pull the string at the bottom of the stairs. The light bulb comes on. And again, I say, "Is anyone there? Who's up here?" Nothing. And then a cold breeze comes down the stairs. And I realize at that point, this is not a normal situation. And I, as people do, walked as quickly as I possibly could down the stairs, darted out the door into the street, no socks and shoes on, and waited 30 to 40 minutes in a snowstorm for my father to get home. Now, when my father got home, he explained to me that people had had similar experiences and encounters in that pink room. He wasn't surprised at all. And then later I told him about how I'd heard footsteps of a large man walking behind me in that upstairs hallway. It sounded like a 200-pound man with work boots on. And so many other people, house guests, had given the same exact account of hauntings in that house. And my father never told people about these experiences. I believe he just wanted even more validation of what he had experienced there. And so forever I will say I believe in ghosts. I know 100% that what my father says in his stories are true encounters, 100% valid and verified by me and many others who had experienced it with him. He speaks truth. And there is nothing that ashames me in saying that I believe in ghosts. I am 100% sane. If you believe this and you have had a similar experience, then we are in a very small club of human beings. There is no science that can verify it. But we know what we experience, and we know what our senses tell us. And when all logic fails, you have to believe in ghosts. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching my father's videos and for sharing your experiences. It's amazing to have this community. It's amazing to communicate our experiences and to know that we are not crazy, that we are in some ways blessed, maybe in other ways cursed, depending on the encounter. But cheers again. I'm here in Myanmar during the pandemic. I hope you are all safe, and thank you for listening.
As you can see, his story mirrors that of my own and my friend Leon's. And like Leon, my son Timmy didn't believe in this stuff at the time, not at all. He just would kind of look at you like people do that don't believe in these things, like, yeah, right, you know, keep talking, yeah, I know. But he became a believer, like he said, after that. My daughter Ann had similar experiences there, plus she said she heard a woman crying in there. I never had that happen. And she had her own experiences, but she didn't want to go public with it. Just, you know, for her own reasons. She wasn't comfortable going public on it, you know, her ghost stories. I respect that. I had friends there that visited me from England that had similar experiences. One of them was staying in the back room, which I call the office, upstairs. In the very back of the room, there's a small room that had to have been somebody's office or something. I don't know, I just call it the office. I put my computer in there. Well, he was sleeping in there, and he had a room caught on fire while he was in there. Good thing he might have gotten sloppy with a candle or something. So there might be an explanation for that. But he woke up and he had a little bit of a fire going on in there, and he was able to put it out. What else happened? A lot. Honestly, I don't know where to start. I'm sure I'll leave things out. I'll get to it, and it's going to get to an end on this, a climax and an end. I'm just randomly mentioning things that happened there. I was sleeping downstairs on the couch in the living room. Had a couple things happen there. One night I woke up and I felt a cold hand on my forehead. And I was on the couch and I opened my eyes and it felt like I felt a small, like a child or a woman's hand on my forehead. It was cold, but it was very gentle. And I opened my eyes and I saw a grayish white human hand, only just a hand, like from here up. I saw it just slowly glide away from my face and then vanish. And I didn't feel threatened by that. It was a very soft, gentle touch, just like somebody, just had their hand on my head. Another time I was sleeping on that couch, and I had a girl I was seeing at the time, and things weren't going quite the way she wanted to go between us. God bless her. And she was a kind of bit of a, there's no way she'll never know, but sometimes I thought she might be a little psycho, something. I'm just being honest here. I hope she never sees this video. If she does, I'm sorry. I apologize. Well, I hadn't seen her in a while. It was kind of getting kind of freaky. She lived a couple of counties away from me. And so, kind of odd, she showed up. I met her at college. One night, I felt somebody, I was sleeping on the couch on my back, and some cold hand had hold of my foot, my bare foot. Very seriously, I felt somebody had gripped my foot pretty hard and were shaking it like this, up and down, pretty hard. And I'm like, what the? I'm like, got up, and whatever it was, let go of my foot at that moment. And I had some little bit of light in there, and I could see standing in the corner of the room in the dark, not the room I was in, but the very far end of the adjoining room, like the parlor, was this girl at 2 or 3 a.m. She'd let herself in. She was like in her 20s, but she let herself in, and she's just standing there in the dark, and she's staring at me silently. And it couldn't have been her that grabbed my foot and shook it. There's no way. Because as soon as I felt my foot getting shook, it woke me up. I looked up, and she wasn't there. She was standing like maybe 20 feet away from me, just standing there staring at me. And I'm like, what are you doing in here? And she says, oh, I let myself in. She said, I was thinking about you. She said, I thought I saw you walking tonight, like in another county. And she says, I wondered if that was you. She said, I went back to pick you up, but you weren't there. And I said, that wasn't me. I've been here all night. Well, I just wanted to make sure you're all right, she said. And, hey, I'm all right. I was hospitable. But that's the story. Something shook my foot to wake me up. Let me know, Tim, wake up. So that was kind of a good thing, right? One time I was sitting there with somebody, I won't mention their name, and we're the only two there. Actually, we're sitting on the porch out back, and there's nobody anywhere. I mean, it was daytime, summer, and a penny flew out of nowhere, hard, like with a slingshot, and hit the wall. Right, we were sitting there with our back against the walls right behind us. We had some chairs up against the wall of the house, right outside the kitchen. A penny flew out of nowhere and hit the wall, bounced off the wall between our heads. And I'm like, what the? She saw it too. And I said, what the frick? And I picked it up. I said, where do you think that came from? Who threw that? And she says, I don't know, and I don't want to know. And so I found the penny, half expecting it to be like an antique penny, that like somebody from another time threw this antique penny at me. But no, it was like a 1994 kind of penny. But yeah, that flew out of nowhere and hit the wall between our heads. Now is where things start getting to the point for me that it really started to wear me down. Honestly, this is one of the roughest times I had in my life. Hello, that's the end of part one. This is a two-part video. I actually made this video last night, and the thing was over an hour long. And not only that, of course, right after I made it, I realized I left out a pretty good part of the story, which is an occurrence my daughter and I had together there. kind of interactive. Part 2 starts turning a little darker at this point. I think part 1's kind of like a prelude to part 2. It was kind of a traumatic time there for me. At times, definitely. And there is it does come to a head at the end of part 2. It starts getting a little more darker. So I split this video in 2 pieces so I could include that other story that I forgot to put in last night. And that will be the story of my daughter and I. When my daughter was living with me, I think she spent a summer there with me. So that would have been that summer that we were together and we were working on the house together. It was a really good time for us both, honestly. We had a really good time together there. So stay tuned for part 2, which should be coming up pretty soon because I've already made almost all of it. I just have to plug in the part about my daughter for that story. It's kind of interesting, telling. So, all right, that's the end of part 1. Thank you.